The late afternoon sun burned over the Arizona frontier, turning the dusty main street of Willow Creek into a shimmering mirage of heat and grit. The year was 1882, and this small, hard-bitten town sat between civilization and wilderness, like a scar that refused to heal. Dust devils twisted between the weathered buildings. Horses stamped restlessly athitching posts, and even the wind carried the smell of sweat and gun oil. Samuel Hayes stood at the edge of a growing crowd, his shadow long against the dirt. At 35, he was the kind of man people instinctively made way for, tall, broad-shouldered, and silent. His gray eyes were sharp beneath the brim of a weathered Satsum, and his face, tanned and lined from years on the range, gave nothing away. He hadn't planned on stopping here long. He came for supplies, but the noise from the saloon-turned-auction yard drew him in. Voices rough with excitement and curiosity, a tension he couldn't quite ignore. At the center of it all stood a crude wooden platform. On it a young woman was chained by the wrists. Her dress hung in tatters, dirt and blood smudged across her pale skin, auburn hair wild and tangled around her shoulders. Yet it wasn't her appearance that froze Samuel in place. It was her eyes, amber, bright and alive, burning with fury. They weren't the eyes of a broken woman. They were the eyes of something untamed. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his oily voice carrying above thirseless murmurs. Josiah Pritchard, Ammon known for trading horses, cattle, and occasionally people, waved his arms like a showman. "What we have here is a genuine wild creature found living in the canyons, stealing from honest folk, fighting like a demon when cornered." The sheriff's boys had quite a time bringing her in. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "What's her name?" "Goes by Elena," Richard said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Speaks when she feels like it, which ain't often. Fights like 10 men when she's riled. Count don't want her. Too much trouble. So we're setting her loose to whoever's brave enough to take her on." Samuel's jaw tightened. The woman, Elena, turned her head slowly, scanning the crowd, her eyes locked on his for half a heartbeat. There was something in that look, something rawand, unspoken, defiance maybe, or recognition. Whatever it was, it struck him harder than he liked. "I know what you're thinking, gentlemen," Pritchard went on. "Why buy trouble? But the wildest horses make the best mounts once they're broke proper. She ain't no horse," Elena snapped, her voice cutting through the heat like a whip crack. "And I'll kill any man who tries to break me." A ripple of gasps and nervous laughter rolled through the crowd. A woman nearby whispered to her husband, "She needs a firm hand, James. Someone to teach her right from wrong." The man beside her smirked. "Maybe I'll give it a try." Samuel's stomach turned. He'd seen cruelty before, the kind that dressed itself up as order. 20? Someone shouted. 5.30? Another voice added. Pritchard's grin widened. "She's a fiery one, boys, worth every penny." 40? Bellowed. Bull Morrison, a heavy-set rancher whose bulk strained his suspenders. "I'll take her. Got room for a spirited filly at my place." The crowd roared with laughter. Elena spat at him, earning a slap from one of the deputies. Blood blossomed at the corner of her mouth, but she didn't flinch. Now, Pritchard said with mock concern. "Let's keep it civil. $40. Do I hear 45? Before he knew why, Samuel's boots were moving. The crowd parted as he stepped forward, the spurs in his boots striking the wooden steps with sharp finality. The laughter dimmed. He climbed onto the platform, eyes never leaving Elena's face. $100, he said, his voice low but carrying. They're shifted. Pritchard blinked, thrown off balance. 100? "You serious, Mr. Hayes?" "Cash," Samuel said, pulling a leather pouch from his coat. "And this now." Morrison shoved forward, red-faced. "Now hold on. You can't just..." Samuel turned toward him slowly, and the look in his eyes stopped Morrison cold. Samuel didn't have to reach for his Colt. The man's hand dropped from his gun belt on its own. "You heard him?" Pritchard said quickly, eager to avoid bloodshed. "Sold to Samuel Hayes for $100. The chains clanked as the deputy stepped forward with the keys. "What are you planning to do with her?" "Someone, Jared." Your ranch ain't no place for a woman. Samuel didn't answer. He just looked at Alina. Her wrists were bleeding where the iron had bitten in. Unlock her, he said. You sure about that, Mr. Hayes? The deputy asked. She's liable to ruin her bite. Unlock her. The man hesitated, then obeyed. The cuffs fell away with a metallic clatter. Elena rubbed her wrists, her fierce eyes fixed in Samuel. You bought nothing, she said flatly. I am no man's property. Never said you were, Samuel replied. But right now, you got two choices. Come with me, or stay with them. He gestured toward the leering faces below the platform. Bull Morrison and the others waited, eyes hungry. Elena's jaw worked. Pride warred with reason. Finally, she nodded once. I'll come, but I won't kneel. Not to you, not to anyone. Never asked you to, he said, stepping down. My wagon's this way. As they walked through the silent crowd, whispers followed like dust. Elena didn't look back. At the wagon, Samuel turned. Can you ride? Better than any man here, she said sharply. Good. There's a mare tied behind the wagon. She's yours to use. Her eyes flickered in surprise, but she said nothing. She mounted with easy grace, settling into the saddle as if born there. From behind, a voice called out, You're making a mistake, Hayes. That wildness can't be loved out of Apperson. Samuel swung up onto his black geeling. Not trying to love it out, he said, voice steady. Maybe it doesn't need to come out at all. The sun was setting as they rode out of Willow Creek, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Two silhouettes, one man, one woman, rode side by side into the wide, waiting desert. The town shrank behind them, its cruelty fading into dust and distance. Neither spoke for a long time, but both knew it. Whatever had begun back there on that platform wasn't ending any time soon. The moon hung full and cold over the desert as they rode through the silent miles. Wind hissed low through the sage, carrying the far-off cry of coyotes. Samuel's horse moved with steady patience, hooves crunching over dry earth. Elena rode beside him, her back straight, her hair loose in the night breeze. She hadn't spoken since leaving Willow Creek, and Samuel didn't press her. He knew the sound of a soul still listening for danger. 3 hours later, when the first silver light of dawn began to break along the horizon, he turned toward a small grove of cottonwoods near a spring. We'll camp here, he said, swinging down from his saddle. Elena stayed mounted for a moment, watching him as he moved to unsaddle his geling, check the cinch and lead the animal to water. When she finally dismounted, she kept her distance. Heiries were cautious, alert, the way a wild creature watched a man who might be friend or predator. This ground's safe, Samuel said, his tone calm. Water's clean and the trees break the wind. And if I decide to keep riding? She asked, her voice carried challenge, sharp and testing. Samuel didn't look up from tending his horse. Then you'll ride into Badlands with no water for 50 minutes. You'll die of thirst before you find shelter, but it's your choice. For a long moment he kept his back turned, knowing full well that showing his back was a kind of trust. He heard the soft scuff of boots behind him. Just for tonight, she said quietly. He nodded, building a small fire. The flames flickered to life, throwing long shadows over the sand. Samuel set out 2 bedrolls, one on either side of the fire, and handed her a tin cup of water. Drink. You've lost blood. Elena took the cup, but didn't thank him. She drank quickly, eyes never leaving his face. When he offered food, jerky, a hard biscuit, and a can of peaches, she snatched it from his hand like a starving wolf. He let her eat insolence. When the last ember of the biscuit had vanished, she finally spoke. Why? Why? What? He asked. Why buy me? What do you want from me? Samuel stared into the fire, the flames reflected in his gray eyes, steady as iron. I couldn't stomach watching that auction, he said simply. I've seen enough cruelty for one lifetime. As for what I want right now, I want to see you alive come morning. Elena's lip curled. Everyone wants something. True, he said. I want good workers from my ranch. I want to sleep a night without ghosts, but none of that means I own you. Her gaze softened slightly, though her body remained tense. And if I run, I won't chase you, he said. But that desert out there, she doesn't forgive foolishness. You'll die out there alone. A cold wind drifted through the grove. The fire danced, shadows flickering over Elena's face, showing the bruises and the bone-deep weariness underneath. You think I'm some kind of animal? She said bitterly. I think you've been hunted like one, he replied. But you're still standing. That takes strength. She looked away, jaw working. Then after a moment she murmured, They called me wild because I wouldn't let them cage me. Quote, Sometimes being wild just means remembering what freedom feels like, Samuel said quietly. For a long time the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then from far off a coyote howled, answered by another. Elena's eyes lifted toward the sound. You understand them? Samuel observed, her amber eyes turned toward him sharply, as if expecting mockery, but finding none. She nodded. Better than I understand people. He banked the fire, the light dimming. Get some rest, he said. I'll take first watch. You think I'll attack you? She asked. I think you've got every reason not to trust a man, he said simply. So I'll sit by the tree there where you can see him. She hesitated, then lay down on the bedroll. Her body remained coiled, ready to spring, even as exhaustion dragged her toward sleep. Samuel sat under the cottonwood, rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the silver horizon. He thought about her eyes on that auction stage. The same defiant spark he'd seen in a cornered stallion years ago before the animal finally let him approach. He'd saved her life today, but he knew that didn't mean she was his to claim. Sometime before dawn, Elena stirred in her sleep, thrashing softly, whispering words he couldn't understand. When she woke with a start, her breathing ragged, Samuel didn't move. Bad dreams? He asked quietly. She nodded, hugging her knees. Always sun will be up soon, he said. We'll ride with the cool of morning. By the time light spilled over the desert, she was already saddling her mare, her motions sharp and efficient. They rode in silence, the rising sun painting their shadows long and lean across the sand. After a while, she broke the quiet. That thing you said in town about me riding into your heart, did you mean it? Quote, Samuel glanced her way. I meant it as a joke. But maybe there was truth in it too. Elena looked away, her expression unreadable. I still might run. I know, Samuel said. But you're here now. That's something. They rode until the land opened wide, revealing a valley dotted with grazing cattle and a cluster of buildings that shimmered in the heat. There it is, Samuel said, slowing his horse. Triple Creek Ranch, my home. Elena said nothing. Her jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the rez. A ranch could mean safety or another kind of cage. As they descended the ridge, 3 figures appeared near the corral. Tom Brennan, the foreman, grizzled, gray-bearded, and steady as a mountain. Miguel Santana, an old hand whose face was all creases and kindness. And young Billy Crawford, barely 18, curious eyes shining under a too large hat. Boss Tom called, approaching. Didn't expect you back with company. His gaze flicked to Elena, then back to Samuel. She'll be staying on, Samuel said simply. Name's Elena. She'll work same as anyone else. The men exchanged glances but asked no questions. Tom tipped his hat. Ma'am, Miguel gave a respectful nod. Binenete, señorita. Elena stayed silent, her eyes scanning every corner, every face, every exit. I'll show you where you'll bunk, Samuel said, leading her toward the main house. Not in the house, she said quickly. He nodded. Room off the kitchen has its own door to the outside. Figured you'd want that. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood, smoke, and coffee. Samuel opened a small side door. Used Toby storage. Cleaned it out. There's a cot, a trunk, and a window facing the hills. Locks from the inside. Elena stepped in slowly. The space was plain but clean, and for the first time in years she felt something unfamiliar. Safety. What's expected of me? She asked. Work? Samuel said. Cooking, mending, helping with the stock. Summer rules, as everyone. You don't work, you don't eat. Simple as that. She studied him. And if I refuse, he met her eyes evenly. Then you leave. I don't hold prisoners here. For the first time, a flicker of respect passed between them. As Samuel turned to leave, she spoke softly. You shouldn't have bought me. Maybe not, he said, but I couldn't stand to see what they'd have done instead. That night, long after the lamps were out, Elena sat by her window watching the stars. The desert wind whispered through the cracks, carrying scents of sage and dust. She didn't know if she trusted Samuel Hayes, but for the first time in years she didn't feel hunted. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For one night, the sun rose over Triple Creek Ranch, casting long golden lines over the valley. For weeks, the ranch had settled into a rhythm, a strange, delicate balance between the quiet rancher and the wild woman he'd brought home. Elena awoke before dawn every day, her instincts sharp as ever. Some mornings she'd be at the well drawing water before the rooster crowed. Other times she'd be out with the horses, her hands gentle but sure. The men on the ranch learned quickly. Elena worked harder than most and complained less than any. Still, there were days when her eyes turned distant, watching the horizon as if it might open and swallow her whole. Samuel noticed, though he never asked. He'd learned patience long ago. One hot afternoon, a storm rolled in without warning. Wind kicked up sand that stung the eyes, and thunder rolled like gunfire across their edges. Tom and the others rushed to get the cattle secured, but Elena had gone farther south with Billy to mend a broken fence. When the storm hit, Billy panicked and lost his horse. Elena grabbed the reins of her mare and shouted over the roar, "Head for their edge. Follow the light when you see it." Samuel saw the storm from the porch and felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. He saddled his horse without a word, riding straight into the wind. Lightning split the sky and the smell of rain and dust filled the air. He found her an hour later crouched beside Billy, shielding the terrified boy under her coat while debris tore through the air. She looked up as he rode in, her face streaked with sand, her eyes fierce. "Don't just sit there," she shouted. "Help me get him up." Between them, they hauled Billy onto Samuel's horse and made for the ranch, the storm chasing them like a living thing. When they finally stumbled into the barn, soaked and shaking, Elena sank to the dirt floor and laughed. A raw, unguarded sound that made Samuel's heart twist. "You could have died," he said, kneeling beside her. "So could you," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Difference is I chosetto." He couldn't argue. He just looked at her, this woman who'd fought storms, men, and her own past, and realized she was more alive than anyone he'd ever known. Days later, when the ranch was quiet again, Elena found herself on the porch at dusk, watching the last light fade. Samuel joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was steady, comfortable, like the sound of horses breathing in a barn at night. "You were brave," he said. "Out there in that storm." She shook her head. "No, just stubborn." "Maybe that's another word for brave," he said softly. She looked at him then, really looked, seeing the man beneath the calm surface, the loneliness that matched her own, the kindness he tried so hard to hide. "You ever get tired of being alone, Samuel?" "Every damn day," he said honestly. "But I figured the world had taken enough from me. Didn't think it had anything left to give." "And now?" she asked. He turned toward her. "Now I'm not so sure." Before she could reply, hoofbeats echoed from the trail. Both turned. 3 riders approached fast, torches flaring in the twilight. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Morrison," he muttered. The men pulled up in front of the house, led by Jake Morrison, Bull's younger brother, lean and mean as a rattlesnake. "Hayes," Jake called, his grin oily in the firelight. "Heard you've been harboring stolen property." Samuel's hand rested near his Colt. "You're trespassing." Jake's eyes slid toward Elena. "Heard stories about you, wild girl. Thought I'd come see if you're really as fierce as they say." "Leave," Samuel said, voice like thunder. Jake laughed. "Don't think so. You made my brother look a fool at that auction. Ain't no man humiliates the Morrisons and lives easy." Elena stepped forward, the porch light catching her amber eyes. "You think you can scare me, Jake Morrison?" she said, her voice steady. "You're not the first man who tried." Jake's grin faltered. "You got a sharp tongue for a woman bought and paid for." Samuel's patience snapped. "That's enough." His pistol was in his hand, cocked, steady. "You say one more word and you'll eat dust before you finish it." Jake looked around, saw Tom, Miguel, and Billy appear from the shadows, rifles raised. He sneered, but his hand stayed off his gun. "This ain't over, Hayes," he spat. "You think one woman's worth dying for?" Samuel didn't blink. "If it comes to that, yeah, I do." Jake cursed, turned his horse, and rode off into the dark. The ranchard went still again. Elena's shoulders slumped with the weight of what could have been. "They'll come back," she said. "Men like him always do." "Then we'll be ready," Samuel said. And they were. For weeks the ranch stood watch, waiting for Morrison's revenge, but it never came. Instead, life slowly returned to the quiet rhythm of dawn and dusk's work and rest. Then one morning, a single rider appeared at the gate, a woman on a paint mare. Elena froze on the porch, her coffee cup slipping from her hand. The rider dismounted slowly, pulling back her hood. "Elena," the woman called, her voice trembling. "It's me, Rosa." The name hit Elena like a blow. She ran, stumbling down the steps. "Rosa, my God, Rosa." The sisters collided in an embrace that drew every soul from the house. Rosa clung to her, crying into her hair. "They told me you were dead. 7 years I searched. I never stopped looking." Samuel stood back watching, his chest tight. When Elena turned, tears streaking her dusty face, she whispered, "Samuel, this is my sister." Rosa's eyes softened when she looked at him. "You're the man who saved her." Samuel shook his head. "She saved herself. I just gave her a place to start again." That night, their ranch was filled with laughter and light. Rosa stayed, finding work as a seamstress in town, and spending her evenings by the fire with Elena. Samuel often watched the two sisters together, their bond, a thing fierce and beautiful, and felt something stir inside him, something like peace. Weeks passed and spring came early. The cattle grew fat. The earth softened with promise and the nights warmed enough to sit outside beneath the stars. On one such evening, Elena found Samuel in the barn mending tack. "You're a hard man to thank," she said. He glanced up. "For what?" "For giving me a home. For treating me like a person." He smiled faintly. "Didn't do you any favors. You earned every bit of it." She stepped closer. "Maybe, but I never said what I should have." He stood slowly, eyes meeting hers. "And what's that?" "You were right," she said softly. "That day in Willow Creek. You said maybe the wildness didn't need to come out. Maybe it just needed a place to rest." Samuel reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You found it, Elena. You're home now." She took his hand and pressed it to her heart. "Home's wherever you are, Samuel Hayes." He leaned in then, and their lips met, a kiss not of conquest but of understanding, forged through dust, fire, and forgiveness. Months later, when the preacher rode out to Triple Creek, the ranch hands gathered near the cottonwoods for the wedding of Samuel Hayes and Elena Marchetti, the wild girl no man could tame. Miguel cried openly. Billy grinned like a fool. Tom just nodded, pride in his weathered eyes. As they exchanged vows, the wind stirred the grass, carrying Elena's soft laughter across the valley. The desert for once felt gentle. That evening, as the sun set fire to the horizon, Samuel and Elena stood together on the porch, watching their cattle graze in peace. "You ever think," he said quietly, "how strange it is that a man can buy trouble and end up finding his heart?" She smiled. "Maybe you didn't buy trouble, Samuel. Maybe you just bought a chance." He turned to her, his hand finding hers. A chance worth every dollar. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, whispering like a blessing. The wild girl had found her home, and the rancher who thought he'd bought chaos had found love. Together they rode the rest of their days side by side. Two souls tempered by the desert, free and unbroken, forever riding straight into each other's hearts.